Good evening. My name is Amber McCrary. I am the programs manager here at Arizona Humanities. We are doing our climate conversations tonight with Naomi Ortiz. Arizona Humanities is the state affiliate of the National Endowment for Humanities. For 50 years, we have supported humanities-based public programs in partnership with cultural and educational organizations in Arizona. And I just want to welcome Naomi and read their bio and also kind of introduce their book that we will be kind of referencing to in this conversation. Naomi Ortiz is a poet, writer, and visual artist whose intersectional work focuses on self-care for activists, disability justice, climate action, and relationship with place. They are the author of Sustaining Spirit, Self-Care for Social Justice.
A lot of S's.
Yeah, a nonfiction book published by Reclamation Press that delves into self-care tools and strategies for diverse communities. Their poetry/prose collection, Rituals for Climate Change, a Crip Struggle for Ecojustice, is out now with Punctum Books and explores how climate change impacts connection to place, expands on, and complicates who is seen as an environmentalist, and reimagines relationship with the land. And a little bit about Rituals for Climate Change, a Crip Struggle for Ecojustice. It combines poetry and the lyrical essay, doesn't contain just one point of view, but encompasses dialectical perspectives which often exist in contradiction to each other. A disabled person is in need of plastic cups and concerned about the overwhelming plastic in our ecosystems. Ortiz expands on and complicates who is seen as an environmentalist and what being in relationship with the land can look like. And let's welcome Naomi Ortiz.
Thank you. We thought we'd start actually with just a moment to bring ourselves to this space. So wherever you are, if you feel comfortable, I'd like to invite you to take a deep breath. And you're welcome to close your eyes if that's accessible for you. And I'd like you to imagine yourself in a place which feels like home. This could be a kitchen table, at a park, outside looking at the stars. Imagine yourself in this place as you continue to breathe. Does this place have any specific sounds or smells? What objects do you notice? Are other living beings with you in this place? Are there ancestors in this place? Where do you feel the sensation of home in your body? Just notice. Thank you. And I invite you to take one more deep breath. And as you exhale, bring yourself to our space that we're sharing today, where we're going to talk about art and climate action and disability justice.
Yeah, thank you, Naomi. And I forgot to show the audience what Naomi's book looks like. And this is the book that we're going to be kind of referencing back to and talking about. And we're very excited to discuss this book.
Yay!
Yay! So, first question. In your poem titled Disability Explained, you write, "Disability is the embodiment of multiple truths at once. It is the description of the ever-changing direction of wind, nimble focus to which way one must scream the loudest. It is both understimulation and overstimulation, not being touched for years and being touched too often without permission. Disability in others' eyes overrules all my other identities. Welcome to the equal playing field of the fear of the vulnerability. In another interview, you've said that disability is confrontation with vulnerability. Could you expand on that?
Yeah, I like how we're diving right in. So vulnerability is fascinating to me. I think my introduction to vulnerability really came, of course, as being a disabled person in society, reliant on different programs in order to take care of myself, in order to be able to function in society. But I think what really crystallized vulnerability as such an essential and interesting piece of disability to me was it's part of a definition of ableism, and I don't have it memorized, so I brought it to read. So this is a definition of ableism. Ableism is a pervasive system of discrimination and exclusion that oppresses people with disabilities. Ableism operates on an individual, cultural, and societal level. Deeply held beliefs about productivity, attractiveness, and the value of human life, combined with a basic fear of vulnerability, result in an environment that is hostile to people whose abilities fall outside the scope of what is defined as normal or socially acceptable. And so it's like all these different belief systems that we carry with us, that we're raised with in our families and society, they're built on also this fear of vulnerability. And of course, to be afraid of vulnerability isn't a bad thing. Like, I'm afraid of fear is part of it is part of the process. But I think what happens a lot of times when we are confronted with vulnerability, there's a tendency to push away from it, to not want to see it, to stick our heads in the sand, just to turn away as much as we can. And so not only does that then affect disabled folks who are seen as, we really remind non-disabled folks of vulnerability a lot, but it also affects us in terms of when we have issues that are scary, overwhelming, like climate change, that make us feel vulnerable. It's like, how do we be in acceptance of this vulnerability to touch in and hold that in order to address issues and problems that are really scary? Like, we can't do that without.
Yeah, and the more that we're talking about vulnerability, I think about the Earth right now going through climate change and how the Earth is kind of vulnerable right now. And the whole concept of you talking about vulnerability to people that might be able-bodied, and how they might see it as uncomfortable. And I can see the connection between disability and also acknowledging climate change being uncomfortable for folks. And I find that really interesting.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
And something I think disabled folks can really offer in this conversation with climate change. It's like, okay, so, yep, we live in a potential, we can look at the world in a lot of ways as becoming disabled, as with all these ways it's being impacted by all the changes that humans are causing, and the ripple effects. And, it's like, how do we be in acceptance, not in this is necessarily okay or we approve of it, but that acceptance level lets us open up to actually engage with it instead of just being nope, I'm done,
Yeah, thank you for that. In your poem, Ode to Plastic Cups, you write, as disabled person, independence is precarious. Ode to Plastic Cups, daily life and reason constructed upon a wobbly set of Crip hacks get me from can't to good enough. Where is my place in zero waste? As a disabled person, how do you reimagine a more sustainable society?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of a typo in there.
Yeah.
But that's okay. People can go and read the poem.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So the question is reimagining a more sustainable society. Whew, that's a big question. Yeah, so there's a few things. I think one thing that disability brings to the scene of this reimagination is our relationship with fairness. I was trying to think of a good example, and a friend of mine was talking about how they had to share a room at an internship where another disabled person got their own room because they used a vent and needed more support. So that was a situation that wasn't fair, but was necessary for function. Or if you think about it more simply, maybe I can cut up an apple I get from the store, but other disabled folks might need to buy pre-cut apples in order to actually be able to eat apples. And so when we're talking about functionality, that is a really different perspective, where we have to grapple with our own feelings of things not being fair. So if I can use less, I will use less, with the understanding that there's going to be some people who may need to use more. So that's one thing that I would love to bring to my reimagining of sustainability. And the other thing that I think is really important is our connection with our own limits. So for me, I have a really good sense, because I'm disabled, I have pretty firm limits, firm boundaries in what I can do in a day, for example. So I have to structure everything around that. But a lot of people don't have that sense of awareness. And I would say in society, I think we look at limits and capacity as failure, and we talk about it as failure. If we don't have a sense of our own limits and capacity and work on respecting those, I don't understand how we can look at our environments and acknowledge that there are limits and capacities and respect them. So I think that that's part of my reimagining of sustainable too, is really getting in touch with the idea of limits and capacity.
Yeah. And when you were saying that, I was thinking too of the concept of balancing. Like you were saying, you feel in order, you feel like you might be taking too much in one area and you will take less in another. And that makes me think a lot in terms of the body and the land and ecosystems and how nature is very much about balance. And I don't know that, and plus I'm also trying to relearn exactly ecosystems and how they play a much bigger role in our lives. And
Say a little bit more about, what do you mean?
I don't know, I the term is I'm sure I know exactly ecosystems, and I think because me and you are both poets and we both have books. And I was looking at my book and I was it said I was number one new release in desert ecosystems.
Oh, interesting.
And I was
that's an amazing genre.
And so I'm trying to relearn the term ecosystem, but I feel I do, but in an indigenous way I know it. So I'm trying to, I guess, relearn some terms, I guess.
I think that's a beautiful point. As a disabled folks often have to take public transit way more than non-disabled people. So, there is these balances, right? We may use a lot less carbon in some ways, where we're using more plastic in others, or I appreciate that point a lot.
Yeah. Thank you. And this kind of goes right into our next question. You write, disabled bodies are ecosystems. Our diversity unfurls a bridge to everything alive. Could you expand on that?
Yeah, disabled folks are part of every single one of our families, right?
Mm-hmm.
No matter where you are in the world.
Yeah.
So we are connected culturally, geographically, all of the things. Disability is part of the conversations. Whether we get heard,
Mm-hmm.
that's like another thing. Especially, I would say, in families sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy, again, to like, look at those limits as a bad thing, as something that shouldn't be respected. And yeah. So I think that, in terms of connecting to that diversity, the ecosystem, it's like, I think about ecosystems as having all these like seen and unseen parts. And so these are these beautiful ways that we're connecting in to seen and unseen parts. And there's a lot of wisdom and depth there that I don't think we give disabled folks credit for a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And that's something I feel like I will definitely think about more too after this conversation. I'll be thinking about it probably for months, especially as a poet, like just like the whole.
It's juicy, right?
Yeah, the whole concept of it.
Some juicy stuff there.
As a society, we are forced to view land as nothing more than a resource. For folks that see land as nothing but a commodity, how do we move this perception?
Ooh, that is so real. I mean, especially here in Arizona right now. I was looking at a map of like new proposed mines, and so many are based here in Arizona, which just blew my mind. Like, we are kind of at this epicenter of being seen as like wasteland, or like the land is not a living, breathing thing. It's profound. Yeah, I think moving this perception, there's a couple things. For those of us who really are invested and believe and fight and work towards protecting ecosystems and loving the places we live, I really think that we need to back away from having nature defined as just wild space, because nature exists in cityscapes too. Like, even outside this window, there is sky, and there's actually a drizzle rain, which is amazing. I'm soaking in the water that's happening. And so all nature is everywhere, right? And so when we have, like, I was looking at some, educational things from the Sierra Club, and they have bringing people out on hikes that are in wild spaces, which aren't wheelchair accessible. And so for a lot of us, like, whether it's disability, age, like, can't afford to be able to go out to like wild spaces, or like just have a fear of bugs or other things, right? Those things are real. And so we need to be able to like have conversations with people about the beauty of nature and where exactly where we are, even if that's on concrete in the middle of the city. Yeah, and I think that's
Yeah. Well, I guess that I kind of want to expand on that question on like, what was your journey in finding connection with the land for you? Like, was it always there? For instance, for me, like, I'm originally from northern Arizona, and growing up, I like, going to visit my grandma and grandpa up north, or my grandma's up north. Like, I always saw like the Navajo reservation as like ugly, and I was like, oh, why do we have to come here? And like, I saw it as desolate and nothing. But then the older I got, the more I learned, the more I travel, the more beauty I saw in like where I come from, where my family's from, and like just learning like all the origins behind the land. And then like somehow, it was a long journey, but like now I feel very connected to the land and where I am from in northern Arizona. I don't know if your journey was any different, or if you always felt like a connection like the day you were born.
I popped out and I was like, yes, I'm here. I love it. No, but I think you're right. I think that the appreciation and the love comes from the relationship, right? And I think that's a beautiful example of that. I mean, one of my favorite pictures from when I was a little kid, my parents didn't have anything, and they would like go out camp. We went out camping as a family a lot. And so when I was really little, I got carried around, which was amazing, you know, on the little kid backpack, you know, and so like in the desert. And one of my favorite pictures is like I'm drinking out of my bottle, and then there's my mom sitting next to me drinking out of like a regular like water bottle, you know, and we're like in the desert. And I'm like a little baby. I just love it. So I was really fortunate to have family in my life who really worked at bringing me out to nature. My mom especially, and my stepdad really like didn't let things like not being able to use a restroom in the middle of nowhere stop us. So, you know, she really invested in, she's an engineer, and so she really invested in trying to put me through all these different tactics of like trying to go to the bathroom. There was like plastic seats and cut out like canvas chairs that did not work, you know. There was like a whole sort of it's really a long story, but
that's so
but
funny.
You know, like those things of like, it's not so much, I think having my love acknowledged was really powerful for me. And then it was more just a question of like, how do we like get you out to where you want to be? And you know, I will say I spend a lot of time in parking lots. Like I will drive to places that like were at the start of the trails, you know, and I will sit and I will like, that'll be my nature space, you know. So it's like, again, you know, it's like these things that these places we kind of underestimate, where nature is profoundly abundant and happening. And so, you know, it's like developing that love from the relationship. I think I've been really privileged to be able to do that. Too.
Yeah. And then, I don't know, I'm just having all these ideas in my head now, and like, you know, to asking you like, you know, like what would a world look like where everyone was connected to the land? But I feel like that could be like a whole poem, or like
a book,
you know. Yeah. Thank you for that. I'm gonna go to question 7. In your book, there is artwork, and all of this lovely artwork is by you. How does poetry, in your book there is artwork and poetry. How does this interdisciplinary style intersect with your human experience?
Yeah. So I come to a lot of my work, I'm so curious, we'll have to have a conversation about this because I'm curious how it is for you, but I really come to my work from a place of questions. And my big question when starting this project for Rituals for Climate Change was, how do I love this place that is changing so profoundly right before my eyes? And it scares me. And so that was like my main question. And throughout the book, actually, there's essays where I have these conversations with the land, which is a lot of me talking and then a little bit of listening, where the land graciously is like usually setting me a little more straight. In the first conversation I have with the land, you know, I go out and I'm like out there all day. I'm like, I don't know how to do this. I'm scared. I can't, you know, like I've never been in a situation where I felt like the land needed from me as much as it does in this moment. I like didn't know how to grapple with that. It's so profoundly scary to me. And so, you know, I express all this, I'm out there all day, and finally kind of wear myself out. And finally I'm like listening. And I feel like the desert told me that it needed me to love harder. And I'm leaving and I'm like, this is amazing. I can love harder. This is great. This is a wonderful answer. And then I really start thinking about it. I'm like, but what does loving harder really mean? Because loving harder has actually contributed to some pretty intensive, sometimes abusive relationships in my life. And so I start this series of conversations with the land in the book about this, and coming to like a deeper understanding of what that can mean. But so starting a project with questions is amazing, but oftentimes I don't get to the answers through thinking really hard about it or even research. A lot of times I get through it through my artwork and connecting in with an intuitive center and just being with it from there. For the cover for the book, that's actually like a 4-foot tall painting. And I started that painting when one of the biggest fires in the Sonoran Desert happened, the Bighorn Fire. It went through like an entire mountain range north of Tucson. And working on that painting during a time where there was literal destruction happening, it was such a prayer. Like I felt every time I was painting that it was a belief in the life that would regrow, even if it was going to be after my generation, because the desert grows so slow. You know, yeah. So it's I need all those things to like make a project happen.
Yeah. And so, would you say that your art is also part of like grief work and like, in a way, like grieving for the land too, from what happened with the fire?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think there's like this nimbleness that we need right now to be touching both loss and love, and to be able to hold that and believe that, you know, life can continue at the same time. I think the land really needs our like faith in it. I mean, granted, yes, we should also like write the representatives and like do the activism, and you know, it's not like that's all it needs, but I think it needs us to not be in like such, at least what the land told me was like, at one point it was like, don't put this on me, you know, like it needs, I think, our belief and love, and it needs to feel cherished. And like we all do, right? Like, don't we all want to see it, be seen and feel cherished? So that's something that I feel like I can bring and do in this moment every day, all the time with the land.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And that just makes me think of like some of my friends that have connections to the land, and they bring gifts sometimes, like tobacco, or they'll plant something, or
Offerings.
Yes.
Yes.
Or they'll create gardens. So that just...
There are so many rituals that we can do with the land, and also that I think has happened with the land, even like menstrual blood, things that have like since the beginning of time, since the beginning of people time, have existed in relationship with the land. I mean, there's like so many offerings, song. I mean, we can offer so much.
And I feel like anyone that knows the land, especially in this area, the Phoenix area, like we could always, like if people are like, well, I don't know, you know, there's no experts out there. There's plenty of experts. There's, you know, the Acoma O'odham people that originally come from this area. They have been part of the land for I don't know how long, and then we had, you know, their ancestors, the Hagam people as well. So I feel like this land was taken care of before, you know, urbanization or settler colonialism came here. So, and I think that's something we could always learn too, is like how do we care more for the land? And yeah, like what are our rituals? What are different ways? And I don't know. It's making me think a lot differently too about like the Phoenix area, and just like even just in my backyard, like what could I do as like a ritual to help with reconnecting to the land in this area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love your point too, because I think one of the things that we can always do is listen more.
Yeah.
So it's like, how are we listening to the people of the lands that we are living on, settled on, all the complicated things with that. And it's, you know, there's oftentimes like very easy ways to like find what are priorities from the tribe in your area, you know, how can you, and then, you know, like maybe some small ways you can support. But the listening is so key, and that's something that we can all do.
Yeah, definitely. Listening, observing, being present.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know. I think we're good with our questions. And did you want to read a poem?
I'd be happy to.
So we're gonna have Naomi read a poem, and then we're gonna open up the floor for some Q&A. So, oh yes, don't forget to type your questions out in the chat if you would like Naomi, if you have a question for Naomi. And yeah, we're gonna listen to a poem.
Since I was talking about the fire earlier, I'm going to read a poem about that time. This is called Heart Remedy for Mountain Scars. Dedicated to the Catalina mountain range. They call you Big Fire Horn Scar. Now we share more than one-sided childhood want for study, teenage neglect or need, adult designated guardian of consistency. Now we share something happened. Ripped through for you centuries grown plants and soil. For me, generations of ancestral grown skin and bone. Both precious, unique, not easy. We know how to be fierce. Tie our roots to ever-shifting plate tectonics. We share beauty, cloud wisps cratered through our valleys, drops of rain that come too fast. They call me deformed. I could never find shoes, junior high nickname of crippled bitch, anesthesia mask held unyielding over mouth by man's hands as I begged through the plastic and gas for just one unencumbered minute to prepare. Words fail to hold enough nuance of being split open, sideways, shuffled around, fondled from the inside. No pain scale number to describe teeth-shattering fire, which lasts for months. Numb is not the absence of pain. It is the description of the void where one sits to examine tender bits held. These pieces are so precious now, the remnants of what is left. They become the new soil to work with. They call you horn, fire, scar, big. Buffalo grass, planted in our desert to feed cattle, surgeries to coerce body to be functional. They always have some reason to insist poison will fix unproductive citizen. After the allocated amount of time, my family would refuse to bring my wheelchair, insisted pain would lessen if I just tried harder, didn't let it stop me, stop acting like a baby, could accept that it was time to stop using the crutch. But they can never understand crutches let one lean, brace body from ground, allow one to go further than with these sliced up feet. They call me difficult. Rebellion and refusal to hurt self for promised gain, marked adult independence with ditched arm brace, limbs free to curl, shudder, move with a lilt, a rhythm all of my own. I know, and do you know, that big horn fire scar and fierce crip name reality, a legacy. We know better than some, trauma sits enmeshed in survival. Our duty, believe in mending, encode in our DNA confidence that generations from now, they will know us by 100 sordid, succulent, honored names.
Thank you.
Thank you. Apologies, y'all. I should have done a little bit of a preface trigger warning, so hopefully people are okay. That's a little bit more of an intense piece, but
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, and we're going to open up for questions. Do we have any questions? Okay, cool.
We have one question from Lauren Mitchell. How would you compare the experience of those who live with disability to the rapid changes our land and climate have been through?
It's a lot of unknown territory. I feel like that it's, we're in a time of such a need for such presence. And I think folks who experience illness talk about this a lot in writing. I maybe see less about this from other kinds of disabilities. But, in the moment with such rapid change and disability being part of this earth experience, human experience, presence is so important to be present with it the best we can, and to be gentle with ourselves. Oh my goodness, this is hard. This is a hard time. It is hard sometimes to be disabled. Yeah, gentleness is a really important aspect too. Yeah.
We have another question from Julianne. They said, I love the concept of finding nature where we're at, even in the middle of a city. Could you talk more about that? How do we nurture nature wherever we're at?
Mm-hmm. Can I just read another poem?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, go for it.
I'm I have an answer to that in a
Yes.
poem. I could summarize it, or I could just read it. This is called Nature Defined. Nature is in the edges between this world and the next. ICU breathing tube, feeding tube, where I hold her arm around oven mitt padded hands to not disturb the steady beat of interventions fueling life. At the edge of the parking lot, a plastic bottle rolls off wind's tongue. I get to know nature from the formerly unnoticed cusp of human-dominated and wild. She surprises me outside my door. Baby mesquite tree shades, ants pillaging our bounty. Orange sunset, pink clouds, golden peach bloom into night. She reminds me how to push on. Births dawn. Pale light outlines bed. Bookshelf holding tattered journals, pictures of mi familia, all my earrings. And my love, a sheet-draped hip silhouette, sprawled long-length toe dip off the mattress. Nature sits with us at the old wooden table, drinking ginger beer and rum with lime, pricks my skin with splinters of laughter, venting the day to make space for tomorrow. I offer nature tribute, water, fruit, for quail, rabbits, javelina, ancestors. Nature responds with jokes in the form of sweat, which drips, drips, curls down spine, laces neck with grime, keeps me cool but cranky as I wait to pick my niece up from work. Nature puckers in the still air between strangers, clustered behind bus stop shade slats, waiting out baby whale cacophony with patience somehow found in reserve. Help a young mother carry on the stroller. Nature is in the relationship of one living thing with another. She recognizes my scent, nuzzles my chest when I roll out onto dirt road, scooter propelled. Cacti, creosote, brittle bush, red and gray rocks. She welcomes me with open sky. So one of my favorite things to do with folks, especially I have some very dear beloved friends that hate being outside. And, but they'll humor me, and they'll still come with me to like picnic areas. And it's like, how can we make this really fun? I'll bring like a little picnic basket. We'll have some like delicious food and drink and just like hang out and be in nature. And they like kind of don't know what's happening, but I'm like, it's happening. So I think there's just these ways that we can be with nature and connect folks in the cityscape. I mean, the little spaces that we have, patios, backyards, a potted plant, like really paying attention and having presence with that can offer us so much.
Yeah, thank you. And do we have any more questions?
One question I have is there a place in Arizona where you have found, where you look back fondly on as a place that has brought you joy being in the nature at? Like, is there a certain spot that lives in your memory?
Yeah. One of the pieces I have has descriptions of going to this picnic area in Saguaro West, which is a national park. So I'm from Tucson, and there's the cities in the middle, and there's a national park on one side, a national park on the other side. So on the west side, there's this really great picnic area that I have had the privilege of being able to go to when I was like a little kid. And then as a teenager, like I was like independent, going by myself so far away because you have to drive over the mountain and down. And then, as an adult, and I have these pieces that describe actually how wild it was when I was a little kid and how much more like built in it is now. But still, like even going from when I was a kid and not being able to hear any roads or cars to now where there's definitely a lot of like noise and traffic, it's still such a sacred and special place. And I think the rocks, we all know each other, and there's like a ironwood tree, which they live for like 500 years. So just being able to be next and with these plant beings that are so old, it's such a privilege. Yeah. Oh, it makes me happy. That's my home spot. That's what I was thinking about in the beginning.
Yeah. When you were talking about going out, to the Saguaro Park with a picnic basket, I was thinking of one of our, one poet that we like, Ophelia Zepeda, and how, because she's from the Tucson, Stanfield area, and like, I think it was in an interview that they asked her like, what's something that you like to do? And she said, I just like to go out to like the desert, like the Sonoran Desert, and like get to picnic chairs, me and my partner, and just read the newspaper.
Oh, that's amazing.
And I was just like, that is very Ophelia Zepeda.
That actually sounds so relaxing.
Yeah.
I mean, especially if you're going to try to consume the news, right?
Yeah. Like they're just out there like
okay.
Yeah. Like in the Sonoran, like, or the Saguaro National Park, just like out there sitting down, reading the newspaper.
Big, giant, wide open sky.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And yeah. Do we have any more questions? Nope. That's it for our questions. And is there anything else that any last words, any poems that you desperately need to get out?
Well, I can leave us with a short poem that is called Ritual for Courage. And I like this poem because, it's simple. In my first book, actually, I don't know how we're doing on time. Do we have like...
Yeah, we're good on time.
Okay.
Yeah.
In my first book, I talked a lot about ritual. So the first book's very different. It's about really like self-care for people who are doing social justice work, all different kinds of social justice work. One of the things that I came up doing activism, and I used to run a national youth run disability project. And what I noticed was like encouraging young disabled folks to try to go in to do collaborative work with other movements, people were just so maxed out that like young disabled folks would come in and they would just react like, you're a problem, can't handle you being here, it's too hard. And so one of the things that I was really curious about with my first project was like, how could self-care be one tactic towards building like mutual liberatory movement? And I think that it helps us be more present and to be a little more patient with that presence. But one of the things I talk about in that book is ritual, and it's something I really built on with this book. But I define ritual as an intentional act that nourishes us, connects us with ourselves, and a bigger picture. So it's an intentional act that nourishes us, connects us with ourselves, and a bigger picture. So when we're thinking about developing rituals in our lives, it doesn't have to be this like super gigantic, elaborate thing, which I love. So this piece is called Ritual for Courage. When I need courage, I draw plants. Like safety can be quantified in drawing, therefore knowing, weeds which grow in my yard, at the side of the road, in the arroyo. In this dry, gritty dirt where I sit, life springs up unadorned, where animal or wind dropped seed, amidst everything. Pencil lines arch, friction of hand slides over page, shakes loose what scares me. As shape becomes form, confidence is inspired by stems flung open wide to sky. Leaves bend in flow of breeze, relax, give themselves some room. Tiny flowers at end of long pentacle, entire plant smooth to the touch, blue-green leaves notched at the margin. Later, learn leaves edible, medicinal herb, papalo calite. A practice to learn the secrets behind a name, fortitude unearthed by greeting what lives at my feet. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Naomi Ortiz, for coming to our part of the state and talking about ecosystems and rituals and environmental justice and disability justice. We're very excited to host you at our house and have this conversation. And thank you to all the viewers tonight that hopped on and asked some questions. Yeah, so.
Thank you, it's such a privilege.
Yeah. Thank you and good night from the Arizona Humanities House.